This is the continuation of Lost Episodes Can Be Found Again. If you want to check out the first video in this series, I've put the link in the description below. And thank you for listening to Mrs. Nightmare. A few months went by with no response. During this time, I researched as much as I could about lost episodes. I found out about another alleged lost episode of the Flintstones. The story behind this episode was much like the other lost episode stories. A special episode of the show aired on an otherwise unused television channel and had gory and surreal content. The main difference between this story and the others was that this one had a somewhat credible outside source. The original forum post had a link to a digitally archived local news article from 1979. The FCC had received complaints from dozens of people claiming to have seen the episode. The complaints came from the Lake Kabetogama region of Minnesota, with most originating from a couple of specific lake resorts. The incident was locally known as the Kabetogama broadcast. I decided the next logical step was to contact the FCC for more details. They responded within a week saying that unfortunately they were not at liberty to give out such information. At that moment, I considered filing a Freedom of Information Act request, but decided to take a different route. One of the two lake resorts most heavily involved with the incident was still in operation. I scheduled a vacation from work, and a few weeks later, I was on my way to Lake Kabetogama. Kleck's Cove was a collection of 15 cabins, a bar-restaurant, and a small boat dock with boats available for lease. I had rented an old A-frame unit and planned to stay for 2 weeks. The resort was a nice place to stay. I spent a few days fishing and seeing local attractions. I fell in with a group of regulars who fished at the resort every year. We went on several boat trips before I had enough courage to ask the oldest of them about the Kabetogama broadcast. "Oh, that funny thing. I actually just missed out on that whole thing. It happened a week before I stayed here in the summer of '79. I heard a lot about it, though. You'll want to talk to Ed about it. He was there." He was referring to Ed Kleck, the founder and proprietor of Kleck's Cove. I had considered asking him about the Kabetogama broadcast before, but wanted to feel out the locals first. However, at this point I decided I was being overly cautious and chose to follow the man's advice. Mr. Kleck was in his late 70s, but his memory was still sharp. He liked to tell stories, and I took advantage of this by starting a conversation with him about the history of the resort and the lake. This got him going for a couple of hours before I brought up the Kabetogama broadcast. "Now, why do you want to know about that?" he asked, seeming taken aback. I told him I had read about it on the internet and what the story said. He shrugged and said, "Oh, well, that's pretty much what happened. Nothing much else to tell, really." I asked if he had seen the episode, to which he responded that he had caught the end of the broadcast after being told about it as it was happening. He said he saw Barney die a horrible and bloody death in some faux Stone Age contraption, but didn't remember much else. He was reluctant to continue the conversation much further, but assured me that the incident was very real indeed. I pondered all I had learned on my drive home. I had been left with more questions than answers, and didn't seem to be getting any closer to tracking down the Aristocats' lost recording. The more I learned, the more new questions came up. Was the disturbing Aristocats version I had seen connected to the Kabetogama broadcast, or the alleged Batman and Robin lost episode? Or was I making connections where there were none? Did that person on YouTube, who claimed to have seen the Batman lost episode, really see it? Or had he just been trolling me? Surely all these claims couldn't be coincidental, but there was no explanation for the existence of these lost episodes. While I was churning all this information over in my mind, I didn't notice the vehicle behind me until it was right up on my bumper. I swerved as it made contact, and I careened into a ditch. The other car drove on without stopping. I wasn't injured. In fact, my airbag hadn't even deployed, but I sat in shock for many, many minutes afterwards. When I finally got my bearings, I called 911 and told them my location based on the nearest mile marker. It took about 45 minutes for a state officer to find me. I told the police what had happened, but wasn't able to provide details such as the make and color of the car that had hit me or the license plate. I did not tell them what business I was on or my lingering suspicion that the incident had to do with my investigation of the Kabetogama broadcast. Despite this experience, I decided to stick my neck out a little more. This was getting serious, and I needed a clear picture of what I was up against. I had an acquaintance in the FBI who owed my family the favor of a lifetime. I convinced him, over dinner that I paid for, to look into the lost media group for me. A few weeks later, he had a document for me. It was an analyst report containing all the information the FBI had on this mysterious group. The information known by the Bureau about the lost media group is so scant as to strongly suggest that the group does not really exist. This report assumes the existence of the group for investigative purposes. However, most of the information contained herein is more speculation than confirmed fact. Most of the testimony concerning the LMG has been hearsay and off the record. The exact nature, size, organization, origins, and goals of the LMG are mysterious. It is said to be a multinational organization that has embedded in multiple entertainment industries and is most active in cities with large concentrations of entertainment companies, such as Los Angeles, New York City, Atlanta, Toronto, and Tokyo. Membership is by invitation only and is rumored to include a number of wealthy entertainment executives and financiers. Secondhand informants report that the group uses a variety of criminal tactics, including bribery, blackmail, and violence, to prevent the dissemination of information concerning them. It is speculated that the LMG uses other crime syndicates as proxies for their operations in order to obfuscate investigations into their activities, and that they mislead people into believing they are more powerful than they really are. Claims that the group possesses supernatural powers are likely the result of selective disinformation campaigns. The Lost Media Group first came to the Bureau's attention during the 1970s, but is said to date back to the early 1900s. During the 1920s and 1930s, an urban legend emerged concerning mystery reels, which were said to be altered versions of syndicated movie theater reels that differed significantly in content and tone from the standard copies. The Bureau believes that the lack of public awareness of entertainment industry standards and copyright contributed to the fact that such works were not reported to the media or law enforcement. A recurring theme in testimony concerning mystery reels is that they often contain violent content that was more extreme than mainstream theater content, and several former members of censorship boards have claimed to have received complaints about them. Witnesses also claim that mystery reels based on live-action films feature different actors, and that these actors, in retrospect, seem to have been coerced. One witness claimed that the actor in a silent mystery reel appeared to be saying, "Help me," before being silenced by someone off-screen. These claims have led the Bureau to believe that the LMG may have participated in trafficking in human beings. The group is also rumored to have been involved in the production and distribution of snuff films. There is as little evidence to support this claim as there is to support the very existence of snuff movies. Other crimes the Lost Media Group is suspected to be involved in include media piracy, drugging of actors, trafficking in endangered species for use in films, and recording executions for other criminal organizations. I pondered over the report. Membership by invitation only, well-funded, well-connected, must be well-organized. Yet their activities seem nothing short of bizarre. Why would a group with the kind of resources this group apparently had not spend them on more traditional and profitable criminal activities? Why would that many people commit so many resources and risk so much just to make movies? There was no way such a sophisticated syndicate could make enough money off of simple piracy to be considered profitable, and the other crimes listed in the report would seem beyond the scope of expertise of a cabal ostensibly comprised of people in the entertainment industry. Was it not about money? An ideological or religious motivation, perhaps? Certainly, it didn't fit any religion I could think of, and it didn't seem like they were interested in influencing elections. They had a message they wanted to send, or an influence they wanted to create, using the power of mass media, and were willing to dabble in any number of crimes toward whatever their ultimate end was. A few weeks later, I received a reply from the former Lost Media Society admin, the one who was said to be attempting to collect lost episodes. He told me he was not aware of an Aristocats lost episode version, but that he was nevertheless now in possession of several lost episode copies, and was willing to show them to me for a price. To be exact, he wanted $1,000. I agreed without hesitation. I was not at a point in my life where I could comfortably spend $1,000 on anything, let alone a prospect that might not deliver, But I was afraid trying to talk him down to a lower offer would make him break contact, and something in my gut told me his claims, at least, were sincere. He gave me the address of a secluded cabin he said he would rent for the purpose, which was several states away. He said to come alone and gave me the exact date he expected me there. I was a little put off by this curt tone, but figured he was paranoid of someone stealing his collection, or worse, being hunted down by the people who made these items. I prepped for the trip and left immediately. When I arrived in the state where the cabin was, it was still a couple of days until our meeting date, so I checked into a hotel. I was up late watching TV in my hotel room with the lights off when I found a channel playing The Aristocats. It was in the middle of the movie, but I kept watching. I grew nervous. I had already watched the whole movie, and I knew there was nothing unwholesome in the standard version. But the setting, alone in the dark, with just the light of the TV, was strongly reminiscent of my traumatic virgin experience with the feature. Soon, though, my unease turned to comfort. I realized there was nothing to fear. Sure, at this point, I was convinced that somewhere out there existed a violent and twisted version of the Aristocats, one which I had been unfortunate enough to somehow see as a child. But that didn't matter. It couldn't hurt me now. I laughed as I realized now I had the chance to relive the memory without the trauma. So I grabbed a snack and continued watching in the dark, for once able to enjoy the film as it was intended to be enjoyed. I was able to appreciate what a truly great movie it was, how much effort was put into the animation and voices, how great even the music was. The soundtrack was a little distorted, though. As I turned up the volume to hear it better, I realized it wasn't the TV. The music became faster and more distorted, and the scene began morphing into abstract images. I heard screams from the TV, and disturbed images too brief to make out clearly flashed on the screen. This all ended with the still image of Berlioz, the one I found on the internet with his eyes bloodshot. On the image were 2 words in red caps: "Stop asking." The screen then went to black. I sat in total darkness, my body quaking, tears and snot running down my face, hardly able to catch my breath. I turned on the lights, threw up in the bathroom, and switched the channel. All the stations were playing normal television, which was somewhat comforting, but I still checked out of the hotel and went to a different one. At this point, I considered giving up the hunt. My first goal had been to find out if lost episodes were real, and I had certainly achieved at least that. Whether going further and finding out the exact nature and origin of them was worth it was becoming an increasingly dubious prospect. Whoever was behind them had powers and resources to seriously threaten me, and I didn't know if full closure was worth risking my neck any further. In the end, I decided to keep going, though. I was close now, and if there was some secret, powerful group behind all these lost episode stories, the world needed to know. Who were they to try to intimidate me into giving up? No, I wouldn't give up the hunt. At that moment, I doubled down in my determination. At the appointed time, I showed up at the cabin. It was night, and the moon flooded the lonely cabin in an eerie glow. There was a vehicle in the driveway, but the lights were out, and there were no signs of occupancy. I timidly walked up and knocked on the door. Without turning on any lights, the man greeted me. For his own safety, I will not describe the man, save to say that he appeared middle-aged. "So, you are serious about this? Good. Do you have the money?" I gave him the wallet of cash. He turned a lamp on and counted it out, then motioned for me to follow him to another room. He closed the door behind him before turning on the light. The room had a high ceiling and nature paintings on the wall, along with a single shelf of old books that were clearly there for decoration. Centered on one of the walls was a large plasma television. There was a lot of space, but the man himself had only put a couple of chairs and some plastic storage tubs on the floor. "So, here's my collection. It ain't very big, but you'll have a hard time finding these items anywhere else. Sorry to have to charge you so much, but you gotta realize I'm taking a huge risk by showing this stuff to a stranger, so you gotta make it worth my while." I trembled with anticipation. At last, I was about to have some real, concrete answers. Like I said in my email, I don't have, nor have I previously heard, of an Aristocats video made by these people. But from how you described it, I completely believe you saw it. It fits right in with the kinds of thing they would make. He continued. "By they, do you mean the Lost Media Group?" I interjected. "Yeah, they would be behind the thing you saw, along with that Batman Lost episode, if it indeed exists, though I haven't been able to find it myself. But again, wouldn't be surprised. I don't know what their goal is in making these things, but they're interesting as hell, so I collect them. I asked if he could share some of his contacts, but he flatly refused. I only give that information to trusted friends, and even if you were one of them, I would make you pay more than you can afford. Please don't ask me that again. You're lucky I even agreed to show you my collection. I was a little flustered by his tone, so I just nodded. Then we got down to business. He opened one of the tubs and pulled out a VCR, along with a black VHS tape with a white label that read Pink Panther in black Sharpie. He hooked up the VCR, inserted the tape, and played it. It was a lost episode from the Pink Panther cartoon series, which was a show consisting of short sketches about 5 or 6 minutes each, with the Pink Panther going on various solo adventures and getting into trouble with the other characters and situations, which he manages with his superior mastery of cartoon physics. There's never any dialogue, save for the occasional wordless exclamation or babbled nonsense, like in Tom and Jerry cartoons. And every short has the Pink Panther theme playing throughout. I had watched a little of the show as a kid, but I don't have many memories of it. This episode was called 40 Shades of Pink, which I assumed was a pun on how Ireland is said to have 40 shades of green, since this was a St. Patrick's Day episode. It took place in a green land that, while not explicitly identified as Ireland, was obviously supposed to be the Emerald Isle, or at least some generic Celtic fantasy land. The short involved the Pink Panther trying to steal a pot of gold from a leprechaun, or rather, the recurring little man character dressed as one. As the Pink Panther was walking over a rainbow, like a bridge, a storm cloud caused it to disappear from under his feet. He fell, and there was a sickening crunching sound. The Pink Panther was shown bleeding out on the ground, bones jutting out. Then he saw the leprechaun's pot and crawled over to it. Despite his injuries, a smile of victory crawled across his face. As he peered down into the pot, the leprechaun appeared from behind and pushed him in, closing a lid over him and then roasting him alive over a fire. The episode ended with the sound of the Pink Panther screaming. Lame, I thought. Someone basically just took the Pink Panther cartoon and gave it the itchy and scratchy treatment. It was somewhat disturbing that whoever did it clearly had access to the original animation resources to make it look exactly like a real episode, but overall, it was underwhelming compared to what I was expecting. The next item was a copy of The Lion King. This time, it was a proper factory copy with a retail jacket. The man told me the movie itself was normal, but there was a special animated short at the end of the tape with psychedelic properties. He warned me that the experience would be far more intense than the Pink Panther tape, and even asked me if I had any heart conditions. Despite his warnings, I insisted on going through with it. He refused to fast forward to the short, saying he wanted to keep the tapes from warping, even though he had the footage digitally archived. After the credits, there were some special features, including some animated shorts I had never seen before. When the title appeared for a short called The Lion, the man paused and once again asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed. I nodded, and he played it. The short feature was apparently a version of Scar, but the art style was completely different. It was a 2D animation, but somehow much more realistic than Pixar animation. It's hard to explain. It wasn't like CGI realism, but there was so much more detail and effort put into the character that gave the impression of realism, while still being paradoxically fantastical. The clip showed Scar walking around a white background before stopping to face the viewer. The camera began slowly zooming in on his face, and his eyes began glowing red. Threatening jungle music began playing. Suddenly, I became very nervous. A vicious grimace emerged on Scar's face, the kind a predator makes before striking. His mouth opened wide, showing rows of sharp teeth, and I heard realistic growling sounds. His face wrinkled in a pattern consistent with the face a lion makes before pouncing. My nervousness turned to terror. My gaze was transfixed on the screen, and I couldn't look away. I knew it was only animated, and even if it wasn't, the lion couldn't get to me through the screen, but I was paralyzed as if facing a real predator. I was in a trance, one that didn't break until Scar jumped and I screamed for my life. I kept screaming until the man shook me out of it. "Sorry about that," he said, "but I did warn you." Once I got my bearings back, I asked for the next item. He gave me a puzzled look, as if he had expected me to just give up and want to go home after the last tape. But he shrugged and got the next one. It was another home VHS tape, labeled Super Bowl 2000. This next one won't do anything to you like the Lion video, but it's disturbing in what it shows. In fact, I'll just tell you what it is. This tape shows a riot that didn't happen. If you didn't know, there was no sports riot at the 2000 Super Bowl, certainly not in the stadium itself, but the tape shows just that. Once again, the man refused to skip to the interesting part to preserve the integrity of the tape. In the third quarter, a referee made a call that didn't sit well with the Titans fans, and someone threw a beer bottle. More people started throwing things, and it escalated into a full-scale riot, in which spectators swarmed the field and attacked each other. You could see the majority of the crowd slowly evacuating the venue, while a small but determined segment began vandalizing the place and having sporadic brawls. There was no commentary at this point, just raw stadium footage that cycled through various venue cameras. And about 20 minutes into the riot, the tape ended. The tape did not cause me to experience abject terror like the last one. In fact, the riot hadn't even been that bad compared to other sports riots I'd seen. But I found it disturbing on a deeper level. The fact that they could alter a recording of a sports event to make it show something that so blatantly didn't happen in reality terrified me. They could only have done it in one of two ways, with editing techniques that were well beyond what was publicly known to the world, or with some type of magic. I still asked to see the next item. The man said it was the last one. It was a plug-and-play video game this time. The man explained that the Lost Media Group was known to dabble in other mediums besides movies and television, and that in particular they were said to produce a lot of lost video games, though this was the only one he had been able to acquire. The game was labeled Pokemon Black Carbonite. I actually remembered hearing about Nintendo making a Pokemon plug-and-play game that was cancelled, but I didn't know if that was the title. The thing was black and bore a white image of Pikachu, sporting a menacing grin. "I'm not going to let you play this. I myself will never play it again. This thing will mess you up, and it's downright dangerous. You can examine the hardware, though." I took it from him and did so. The first thing I noticed upon closer inspection was a fissure in the control pad. A lot of force had been applied to make that crack, and then I noticed that some of the plastic was warped, melted. I looked at the man. He gave me a look back, a look of understanding that there was nothing more that needed to be said. I handed the game back to him. The man said some goodbye formalities, put his hand over my shoulder, and aggressively led me to the door, closing and locking it behind me. He never saw my camera. During the line short, I had managed to snap a quick digital photo of the TV screen while the man wasn't looking, and had put the camera back away before the whole bad acid trip thing. I had the photo enlarged and enhanced and studied it. It was still frightening even without the psychedelic properties of the animated short. Again, despite being a cartoon, it had such detail and realism that it seemed more alive than I thought a cartoon could.